So the ambassador, the Russian ambassador, saying there'll be evidence that Britain's involved in attacks on the Black Sea. I thought it was the business of Britain, the stated business of Britain, to provide weapons to attack Russian targets.
I mean, I mean, this is right out of Russia's classic playbook. So their Black Sea fleet was attacked. It sort of came back into the game with great fanfare last week after the former flagship was sunk in April, and then the Ukrainians had the temerity of attacking the fleet again, and the Russians then thrash out in kind of the only way they know how. So they attack further once again against Ukrainian civilian targets, infrastructure targets. They then stop grain shipments, which they've now restarted, and then they go and do this. They kind of make these kind of fantastical accusations against the Royal Navy, whom I have the greatest respect, incidentally. So, as I understand it, our British ambassador in Moscow was summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to answer for the Navy's alleged actions. And these claims that evidence will be forthcoming. Of course, what the Russians are trying to do is twofold. Firstly, if you think back to the Salisbury attack, where the British government, I have to say, did a fantastic job of exposing what the Russians had done and using hard evidence to demonstrate that to the international community. On the face of it, that's what the Russians are trying to do in return.
Yeah.
I very much look forward to trying seeing their version of some kind of evidence, because I'm very confident there won't be any.
But I wonder what on earth they mean, or suggest they mean by involvement. I mean, clearly the idea of a British Royal Navy warship engaging a Russian Navy asset, that's off the chart. But is it not the case that Britain has been helping with such things as satellite surveillance and intelligence, which could be construed as an involvement in Ukrainian attacks? And we are in favour of Ukrainian attacks, after all.
Well, indeed so. There's a fine line, isn't there? And Britain, along with our NATO partners, over the last 8-9 months, have been running a very carefully calibrated line in terms of what sort of support they felt they could provide to the Ukrainians, both in terms of weapons, but also more indirect support as well. I'm clearly no longer in uniform, and therefore I don't know exactly where that line has been drawn. That's for the Defence Secretary to comment on. But any suggestion by the Russians that there was a more direct British involvement? I mean, we know, they've also accused the Royal Navy of having been behind the attack on the Nord Stream gas pipeline. This is classic Russian disinformation. Of course, the prime target audience is their own audiences.
Yeah, I mean the ambassador was also talking about nuclear war and how it should never be fought, and echoed sentiments from Vladimir Putin himself in recent days. What does that mean? Are we looking at the Russian leadership now, just trying to get the message out there that actually at the top of the Kremlin pyramid they are actually rational, that they are measured and not entirely irrational and unpredictable and dangerous for that reason?
Yeah, but I think there's probably a bit of that. I think there's also a little bit of President Putin trying to get the international community and the narrative dancing to his tune. So we all know it was him who put the nuclear issue onto the cards in the first place. He's indirectly threatened it a couple of times through the course of the conflict, and that has generated conversation and counter diplomacy. But he kind of likes people dancing to his narrative.